Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills, and welcome back to Legacy of the Pink Panther, a 12-part retrospective on the films and cartoons of the Pink Panther franchise. Last time, we looked at Trail of the Pink Panther, which was Peter Sellers' final entry in this film series. And pretty much we determined that it actually serves no purpose as a movie, except to act as a clip show for better films in the series, and to set up the plot of this movie that we're going to look at today. As a result, the movie suffered, some would say justifiably so, at the box office. Blake Edwards apparently thought this might happen, so the next film was shot back-to-back with all the original footage from Trail. As a result, the next movie continues the abandoned plotline of the previous film, finally following up on the disappearance of Inspector Clouseau. Edwards planned this new film to breathe new life into the series by retiring the existing characters and changing the main locale of the series in future films. In fact, the plan was to have 6 films in this new phase of the series, with a new movie coming out roughly every 3 years. Edwards would not actually direct these new films, but hand each one off to a new director, with the idea being that the Pink Panther series would act as a comedic answer to the James Bond franchise. Obviously, that didn't happen. And it would turn out that the film's title would be oddly prophetic once production wrapped. But before we get into all that, let's find out about the ultimate fate of Inspector Clouseau in Curse of the Pink Panther. We open with a replay of the theft of the Pink Panther from the previous movie, but this time we see where the thief went. He meets up with a dark-haired woman, once again Joanna Lumley, this time playing a different role, and they discuss to do with their ill-gotten gains, and get a surprise visitor.
How much?
6 million.
But that's ridiculous.
It's worth 30.
It'll have to be split up. We'll lose at least 40% of it.
Enough.
What?
I am Clouseau, and justice will be done in the name of the law.
From here, we go to the obligatory animated opening sequence, and then to Paris, where a reporter, played inexplicably by Ronald Reagan's daughter Patricia Davis, informs us that it's been a year since Clouseau disappeared, and the government of France is about to launch an investigation to find out exactly what happened to him. This, of course, does not please Chief Inspector Dreyfus.
Operation Paragon?
Yes, the president's idea. If France's greatest detective is missing, then get the world's greatest detective to find him.
And how do you find the world's greatest detective?
By computer. The commissioner's idea. Interpol has computer files on every law enforcement agency in the world. And I'm supposed to program the computer to select Clouseau's clone.
Ah, yes, the early 80s, when computers in movies were magic thinking boxes that could do almost anything. And they occasionally went crazy and tried to kill everyone for no good reason. Being in a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, Dreyfus decides to take action to sabotage the entire project. To do so, he calls upon the services of Maurice Steiger, a computer expert serving 15 years for embezzling from the Bank of France. But the money, to the tune of 150 million francs, was never recovered. Steiger is up for parole, but thinks Dreyfus wants to know where the money is in order not to interfere with the parole board.
Can you rig a computer so that no matter what I program into it, it will select the exact opposite?
Black is white, day is night.
Exactly.
What sort of computer?
Huxley 600.
There is only one of those in this country. How are you going to get me into Interpol?
I can't.
Well, then how do you expect me to rig it?
I don't. I expect you to tell me how to rig it.
And so, Dreyfus, the President of France, and the media all convene in order to discover who is going to go in search of Inspector Clouseau. However, it would appear that it's not just Dreyfus who isn't exactly overjoyed at the prospect of Clouseau's return.
In a few moments, Aldous, the computer, will select from the files of all the law enforcement agencies in the world the one man or woman most qualified to solve the disappearance of France's greatest detective.
And screw up my entire life.
Just over a year ago, while investigating yet another theft of the famous diamond, the Pink Panther, Inspector Clouseau seemed to vanish from the face of the earth, leaving behind one of France's greatest unsolved mysteries.
Not to mention the 4,000 francs he owes me.
And now working on the theory that the best person to find Clouseau is someone almost exactly like Clouseau, Chief Inspector Dreyfus will program Aldous, the computer, with a character profile of Inspector Clouseau.
That's going to put a hell of a strain on poor old Aldous.
And so, after Dreyfus nearly loses it while entering the characteristics of Clouseau, or at least the ones everybody thinks are Clouseau's characteristics, Aldous makes the selection.
From the 11th Precinct of the New York City Police Department, I give you a little drum roll, please. Officer Clifton Sleigh.
Got a light, big boy? Cliff, broads don't call guys big boy anymore. Oh. Right, Charlie.
You know, I recognize that the work of Seth MacFarlane can be considered somewhat controversial on the internet in this day and age, but honestly, sometimes you just gotta go with a clip from Family Guy.
I say, Carruthers, you know what's very, very funny? A man dressed in women's clothing.
Yes, quite. Ripping good love.
After Cliff's undercover attempt goes bad, he gets called into the office of his lieutenant, who could probably start a support group for overstressed police officials with Dreyfus. We also learn that Cliff, played by Ted Wass in his feature film debut, is a third-generation police officer and appears to be just as much of a buffoon as Clouseau was.
Until this came, I was a desperate man, faced with two choices: retirement or murdering you.
Gee, I don't know what to say.
Fortunately, you don't have to say anything. The police commissioner sent for both of us. Congratulations, Sleigh. You're assigned a special duty with Sûreté.
I trust you'll bring this error to the commissioner's attention.
I considered it. But then I remembered the immortal words of Theodore Dump, the Coos Bay strangler whose death sentence was commuted 2 minutes before they pulled the switch. Never look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, get used to hearing that, old chestnut. Meanwhile, in France, the underworld is thriving as we look in again on French godfather Bruno Langlois, played once again by Robert Loggia.
Whoa, Robert Loggia!
Really? Thank you. And yes, we're finally done with that gag. Anyway, much like Dreyfus, Langlois is worried that Cliff might find Clouseau and so puts out a contract on him. But thanks to a terrible storm with ridiculously high winds, the first attempt on Cliff's life doesn't pan out. Neither does the second attempt after Cliff lands in Paris, where, thanks to the hitman being a jerk to a kid, not one, but 2 other attempts are foiled. And then Dreyfus meets Cliff.
Detective Sergeant Clifton Sleigh.
And this, of course, leads to the question that will be asked more than once throughout this entire movie.
When they were pulling out the goldfish, I remember thinking, did Clouseau have any relatives in the States?
Clouseau breeding. That's a terrifying thought. Cliff begins his investigation at Clouseau's apartment, which, once again, Cato has turned into a lucrative business venture as a museum dedicated to Clouseau. This also leads to the obligatory ambush fight. But, as usual, a phone call interrupts the proceedings, once again from Professor Balls demanding payment of the 4,000 francs Clouseau owed him when he disappeared.
And I was hoping I could beat you up so badly you might give up trying to find Inspector Clouseau.
Oh? Why don't you want me to find him?
Because he used to beat me up so badly, I kept wishing he would disappear. There's an old Chinese saying, 人哋送雞多謝先，生蛋唔生蛋都係雞. You speak Chinese?
No.
Well, the nearest English equivalent would be, never look a gift horse in the mouth.
Told you to get used to that cliche. Cliff goes to see Professor Balls, who really has no actual info to shed light on Clouseau's disappearance, but succeeds in selling Cliff the last project he worked on for Clouseau, the Instant Companion Kit, including the Instant Companion Pet, which proves to be useful since the fake dog attracts the attention of a real dog, resulting in Cliff narrowly avoiding another assassination attempt. After reporting to Dreyfus, with predictable results, Cliff visits Lugash.
Well, obviously the first thing to do is to figure out how the thief got in.
This concludes Cliff's visit to Lugash. Next, he's off to the south of France to have a few words with Sir Charles Lytton. But before we go there, let's check in with the dark-haired woman who masterminded the theft of the Pink Panther.
When you take into account that the mob has already tried to kill him 3 times to stop him from finding Inspector Clouseau,
Chief Inspector.
I don't think that we've got anything to worry about. Still, all things considered, I'm glad you had the surgery. Even though you're temporarily incapacitated, in the long run, I'm sure it'll be more than worth the time.
When Cliff sees Sir Charles, we see that his nephew George is also still around, once again played by Robert Wagner. And Sir Charles reveals that before his disappearance, Clouseau did visit to question him about the theft of the Pink Panther.
Who wanted to know if Clouseau questioned me about the theft of the Pink Panther.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. He questioned me.
He did.
Oh, yes. He questioned me 3 days after the robbery, on the 3rd of August, to be precise, at 1:15. He stayed for lunch.
And fell in the pool.
It was never proven that you were the Phantom.
No, that you took over or I left off. But, George, you can understand why he was suspicious and why he wanted to question me.
Oh, sure.
And then when he was satisfied that I was completely innocent and couldn't possibly have had anything to do with it.
Because we were in Barbados with George at the time of the robbery.
Then Inspector Clouseau took off for Valencia.
Valencia. Ah. Well, that leaves me with just one question. You said Valencia.
It's in Spain.
Ah, that Valencia.
Sure, just run off to Valencia without any idea why Clouseau was going there or who he was going to talk to. 'Cause that's how you run an investigation. Meanwhile, while Cliff was talking to the Lyttons, one of Bruno's goons affixed a bomb to Cliff's taxi. As Cliff leaves the mansion, a second car, presumably the agents of the Lugash secret police, given orders to ensure Cliff doesn't find the Pink Panther, tries to shoot him, leading to a car chase that ultimately ends with Bruno's goons in a 4-car pileup, and the agents presumably getting blown up when a bomb in the taxi goes off after Cliff and the driver ditch it. Meanwhile, Cliff gets an opportunity to try out Ball's instant companion as he tries to elude Bruno's goons, who have, in fact, gotten out of the pileup. And thus the concept of the real doll was born. Unfortunately, due to some rogue cigarette ash, a hole is burned into the leg of the doll, causing it to deflate. Cliff makes use of a handy wine cork and decides to check into a hotel room to hide out and contact Dreyfus.
I don't know the name of the hotel, but somebody's following me. They tried to shoot me on the way to Nice.
Oh, my God. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the location of the hotel. Well, it's in this south of France. It's on a small street. Look, I don't know what the point of this is, because even if I knew where I was, you're there, and I'm dizzy. That's better.
Hello? Are you there?
After this, Cliff finally heads for Valencia, and there's a street festival going on that night. But it turns out Bruno and a couple of his goons have checked into the same hotel. And Bruno has also hired a very familiar face as backup. Yes, it's the return of Mr. Chong. This proves to be relevant when Bruno and one of his goons tries to kill Cliff on the streets, but fail. Cliff ducks into a cafe to hide and encounters an attractive blonde who offers to help him. One of the goons shows up, but the two manage to escape into the alley, only to find Bruno and his goons waiting. The blonde proceeds to kick all their asses, and Cliff even manages to get a few lucky hits in. Eventually, she manages to take down the goons, but quickly finds herself overmatched when Mr. Chong shows up. This might in fact be the takeaway for the entire Pink Panther franchise. When skill can't save you, dumb luck probably will. After this, Cliff tries to see the chief of police as he intended, but the blonde woman runs off. Cliff decides to follow her through the crowd where George Litton happens to be in attendance. Meanwhile, someone makes contact with the chief of police about Cliff.
He hasn't shown up yet. He just went into the hotel. I'll be there. 10 minutes.
Good.
Guess who? Cliff returns to his room to find the woman, who identifies herself as Juletta Shane, waiting for him, and we also see who else is following Cliff.
Oh.
Does it bother you?
No.
Did you guess? Because if so, well, you've been paying attention. Juletta attempts to seduce Cliff, but he waffles about staying or keeping his meeting with the chief of police. But it would also appear that Juletta has an agenda of her own.
I've got to go. I hope you're here when I get back.
Clifton,
What?
here's to being here when you get back.
I'll drink to that.
Well, that's put one hell of a damper on the evening. The police arrive and arrest Cliff, much to the delight of Dreyfus. Fortunately, it turns out that Juletta's not dead, just tranquilized, but there's other complications.
I recognize her. She's the Countess Chandra's personal secretary.
Her name's Juletta Shane.
Her name is Julie Morgan. She's been with the Countess for 7 years.
Who's this Countess that...
I asked the question, Senor Sleigh.
Sergeant Sleigh.
Is that Sleigh as in kill?
No, it's Sleigh as in one horse open.
Why do you shoot them?
I didn't. I'm a New York City police officer working with the Sûreté.
Yes, investigating the Clouseau case.
Yes.
Yes, they said you would say this.
Well, you have my identification.
Excellent forgeries.
Cliff is taken into custody, but one of the officers drinks the wine Juletta drugged, giving Cliff an opportunity to escape, where he's conveniently rescued by George and taken to the Litton yacht, where Sir Charles helps Cliff out of the handcuffs.
Obviously, those are not your handcuffs, so you don't have a key. Darling, may I borrow your manicure set?
Oh, yes, darling.
Thank you so much.
I'll time you on that, Uncle Charles.
All right, this should do it.
There you are.
Thank you. I feel I owe you an explanation. You see, there was this young lady who said her name was Juletta Shane.
Juletta, what a pretty name.
Yes, but her real name was Julie Morgan.
I know Julie Morgan.
Didn't she work for Countess Chandra?
Yes.
12 seconds, Uncle Charles.
Oh, stop, George. That's not fair. You're a rattle.
Yes, don't rattle me, George.
What I really love about this scene is that it just is so blatantly obvious that the Littons are just openly admitting and showing that Sir Charles and George have both been the Phantom over the last few years, and that they really don't care if Cliff picks up on it or not. On the flip side, it also shows that they genuinely seem to like Cliff and find him just as amusing as they found Clouseau, which gives them the impetus to help him out by giving him a lift to Countess Chandra's exclusive health spa in Majorca. As it turns out, the dark-haired woman who masterminded the theft of the Pink Panther is Countess Chandra, and her new companion appears ready for the bandages to come off.
Sometimes it is possible to look like one person, but actually be another. Ta-da!
My God! It's fantastic! Oh, darling.
Don't kiss him too hard. His lips might fall off.
The Litton yacht arrives in Majorca, and Cliff mentions he'd like to case the layout of the spa, which gives the Littons the idea to set Cliff up to do so via parasail. But it would appear that Dreyfus has managed to follow him. Cliff to crash land right in Countess Chandra's rooms, and will also, although he won't realize it, lead him to the man that he's been looking for.
What Julie does in her own time is her own.
My God!
Yes, I know that.
You!
Yes, it is me. I'm just checking the bar for the bar fleas, you know. Swan step. You really should do something about your architect, you know, my darling.
Darling,
Yes, my darling?
you're smoking the wrong end.
Yes, I knew that. You don't have to tell me I'm smoking the wrong end. Do you know why I am smoking the wrong end?
No, darling, but I'm sure you got a very good reason.
Right. I am smoking the wrong end because I have a very good reason.
Before I left New York, I read you were making another movie.
He had 2 weeks off.
This is actually a true statement. Roger Moore filmed this cameo while he was on his days off from shooting the James Bond movie Octopussy. According to Joanna Lumley, the scene was also shot in one take with no rehearsals. Apparently, MGM was really ticked at Edwards at this point for the movie going over budget, so as a result, they were insisting on everything getting done as soon as possible. Now, during the Peter Sellers era, Edwards and Sellers would work out the choreography and rehearse the scenes extensively to get the timing of the gags down. But by this point, without Peter Sellers around as a box office draw, MGM really wasn't willing to work with Edwards as much, and so pretty much everything had to be pushed to get in the can as soon as possible. In fact, this scene was the very last thing they shot. That said, Roger Moore is amazing in this scene, getting all of Sellers' Clouseauisms down perfectly, even with a passable version of Clouseau's mangled accent. It also shows that Moore has a knack for physical comedy, and rushed or not, this scene's a true delight to watch. But back to the plot. Cliff decides to take advantage of the situation to ask about Clouseau.
Have you ever seen this man before?
No, I've never seen this man before in my life, never.
It's Inspector Clouseau.
Chief Inspector.
That's Inspector Clouseau?
Chief Inspector.
Do you know him?
Yes.
What?
Well, he came here about a year ago, but he said his name was Gino Rossi. He wanted the name of a good plastic surgeon, so I recommended Dr. Prosper Stang of Madrid.
Well, I guess that just about does it.
It does?
Yes. There is one more thing, though. Could I have your autograph?
Dreyfus calls for a hospital plane to go home, and Francois reports that Cliff called to say he was headed to Madrid to talk to Dr. Stang. Countess Chandra and her companion say goodbye to Cliff and celebrate their triumph. Except...
Oh, my God! It's gone!
Swine phantom.
Wait for it. Cliff makes his final report to Dreyfus, providing a photo of what Dr. Stang claims Clouseau looked like after the surgery. The photo is, of course, of the man who stole the Pink Panther that Countess Chandra shot at the beginning of the movie, thus leading to the following conclusion.
All I wanted to say is that the Valencia police identified the man in the photograph as a John Doe, who had been shot and whose corpse was found washed up on the beach.
Obviously killed for the diamond.
Obviously.
Shouldn't we have the body exhumed just to make sure?
No. I have compared Clouseau's fingerprints with those of the dead man, and they are identical. Oh, yes. There's no doubt that Clouseau is dead. Goodbye, Mr. Rossi, alias Chief Inspector Clouseau. Peace at last.
Well, bon voyage, Sergeant. Well done. You should come again sometime.
Thank you.
Help! Help! I'm burning! Hurry up! Get the hose!
The hose. There.
Hurry up! Help! Help! Hurry up! Hit the water! Help!
as for the Pink Panther...
Check.
Mate! Ah.
Beautiful.
Do you, recommend Countess Chandra's?
Definitely. In fact, I'd love to go back there and spend more time.
By the way, I seem to be missing a glove.
Always leave something for something is my motto. What's yours?
Never look a gift horse in the mouth.
I'll drink to that.
And so, after 20 years, the notorious Phantom finally claims the prize that eluded him so long ago and started us on this long, strange journey. While it has problems, I honestly like this movie. Yes, some of the sequences go on for too long and the movie could use a lot of tightening where the editing's concerned, but most of it is pretty funny. Clifton Sleigh is very much his own unique character with some of the same foibles of Clouseau, but not actually being a clone of Clouseau. The cast is excellent as always, with of course Roger Moore's cameo as the standout. All in all, as a conclusion to the Clouseau saga, this movie, while not as good as the Sellers films, holds up pretty well, and serves as a much better capstone than Trail of the Pink Panther did. Unfortunately, critics, audiences, and even the studio didn't see it that way. Because Trail of the Pink Panther was a box office bomb, and both it and this movie both came in at over $1 million over budget, MGM pushed the release date from May of 1983 to the summer movie Dumpster at the end of August. And as a result of MGM shenanigans, Blake Edwards sued MGM for $180 million for willfully sabotaging the film. MGM responded by suing Blake Edwards for fraudulent overspending during production, which caused Blake Edwards to sue MGM again for defamation of character. All told, the lawsuits piled up to about $1 billion once all was said and done and were ultimately settled in 1988. Now, obviously Ted Wass never did any more Pink Panther films. And he appeared in a few movies off and on throughout the 80s, most notably opposite George Burns in Oh God, You Devil. However, he actually rose to prominence on the 90s sitcom Blossom, where he landed the role of Blossom's dad. And after that series ended, Wass retired from acting and stepped behind the camera, where he continues to work as one of television's most noted directors. As far as the Pink Panther series is concerned, well, it looked like it was dead in the water. Most everybody seemed to assume that without Peter Sellers, the series had no legs. But Blake Edwards wasn't ready to call in the towel yet. He had one more idea to continue the film series with a new character, even though it would take about 10 years for it to be seen in the theaters. So we're going to look at that next time when Roberto Benigni continues the Clouseau lineage in Son of the Pink Panther. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next time as we look at the legacy of the Pink Panther.